Have you ever noticed how loud silence becomes when someone expects a reaction and doesn't get one? They say nothing breaks a fragile ego faster than indifference. But it's not just about ignoring someone. It's deeper. It's the way you refuse to engage, the way your calm presence exposes their chaos, the way your silence acts like a mirror, showing them their own noise. Some people feed on control. They live for the rise they get out of you, the flinch, the over-explaining, the emotional defense. It makes them feel powerful. But when you don't respond, when you look through them as if their manipulation is invisible, that's when the ego begins to crack. Because ego needs confirmation. It thrives on attention, even negative attention. And when you don't provide it, when you remove the fuel from their fire, they're forced to sit in their own smoke. They'll call you cold, arrogant, distant. But what they're really feeling is powerlessness. You've shown them that their behavior no longer works on you, that their tactics bounce off a surface that's no longer reactive, that you've become immune, not out of spite, but out of growth. This isn't silence as avoidance. This is silence as strategy. It's knowing that some wars are won by not stepping onto the battlefield, that the loudest truth is sometimes said with no words at all, that your peace is more important than their validation. And here's the thing they hate the most. Your silence forces them to hear themselves. When you stop playing the game, when you stop dancing to their rhythm, when you go still, they lose the spotlight. And their ego, it collapses under its own weight. Some people will try to provoke you just to feel in control. They'll say things to get a rise out of you, to break your calm, to shake your self-worth. And in the past, maybe it worked. Maybe you used to explain, defend, overthink, or chase after clarity that never came. But now you've learned to sit in silence, not because you have nothing to say, but because you don't owe them your energy. And that silence, it terrifies them, because they don't know what you're thinking. They can't read your next move. They don't get the satisfaction of knowing they still have power over you. This is the shift they never expected, that your silence isn't weakness. It's strength refined. It's power focused. It's emotional intelligence in its sharpest form. You've realized that not everything needs a reaction. Not every accusation deserves a defense. Not every insult deserves attention. Sometimes, the most powerful move you can make is no move at all. It's not that you don't feel. You do. But you've learned to master those feelings instead of being mastered by them. And that's what separates growth from reactivity. People with fragile egos thrive in chaos. They feed off emotional confusion. But when they're faced with someone who refuses to spiral, someone who stands in their stillness, that's when their mask slips. Because now, they can't predict you. They can't manipulate you. They can't control a version of you that isn't trying to please or prove. And so they become frustrated, uncomfortable, even angry. But deep down, they know they've lost their grip. This is what happens when you stop explaining and start observing, when you stop chasing and start choosing, when you stop arguing and start listening to yourself. It's not silence out of fear, it's silence from clarity. And that clarity, that's what breaks them. They expected you to argue, to beg, to over-explain yourself just to keep the peace. But you didn't. You chose stillness. And it's in that stillness where your power lives. Not in noise, not in chaos, but in the quiet refusal to be dragged into battles that drain your soul. Because here's the truth. You don't owe anyone your presence just because they want it. You don't have to engage with someone simply because they expect it. You don't need to prove your value to people who keep asking you to. There's strength in restraint, in choosing to say less, in choosing to let your silence be the statement. It's not about punishing them. It's about protecting yourself. It's about walking away from situations where your energy is exploited and your peace is optional. They'll say you changed, that you're distant. But the truth is, you just stopped lowering your standards to be accepted by people who never raised theirs. And while they're busy trying to figure out why you went quiet, you're busy learning how to breathe again. You're discovering that peace doesn't come from being understood. It comes from understanding yourself. This is why silence is so dangerous to people who manipulate. It denies them their favorite weapon, control. You didn't shout. You didn't slam the door. You didn't create a scene. You simply left, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. And that kind of exit, it echoes. You don't need closure when clarity is enough. You don't need apologies when you've already reclaimed your worth. And you definitely don't need to explain your silence. Let them wonder. Let them feel what it's like when your energy no longer answers to theirs. If this spoke to your silence, subscribe now. The rest will hit even deeper. You see, they counted on your noise, your explaining, your constant need to be understood. That's where their power lived, in your response. In your emotions, in the way you would rush to fix, to justify, to smooth things over. But when you grew quiet, the power shifted, and not in their favor. Now they're left staring at their own behavior without your reaction to shield them from it. There's no one left to carry the weight of their insecurity, no one to absorb the impact of their manipulation, and they're not used to that. They're used to you folding, softening, returning. But silence gives them no signal to read, no opening to attack, no emotion to exploit. It's a boundary they can't cross, a mirror they can't avoid. Because here's what most people don't understand about silence. It speaks. It says, "I've seen enough." It says, "This conversation isn't worth my energy." It says, "Your power over me is gone." And when someone who's used to dominating your peace suddenly loses access to it, they unravel. They reach out with guilt, or anger, or passive aggression. Not because they care, but because they miss the control. But you've stopped performing. You've stopped dancing for approval. You've stopped making yourself small just to keep others comfortable. Your silence now isn't just a moment. It's a message. A declaration that the old version of you no longer exists. That the person who tolerated disrespect, who tried to fix everything, who needed validation, is gone. This is the part where they feel your absence more than they ever felt your presence. And that's the point. You weren't silent to hurt them. You were silent to heal you. Silence is not passive. It's not weakness. It's not avoidance. It's the conscious decision to protect your energy, to stop explaining things to people committed to misunderstanding you, to stop proving your worth in rooms that never saw it in the first place. And in a world obsessed with being seen, being silent becomes a rebellion. They'll feel it before they understand it. That stillness of yours, it hits them harder than any outburst ever could. It shakes their confidence because they can't predict it. They can't prepare for it. It's not part of their usual playbook. You're not reacting. You're responding with absence. And that absence, it forces them to face themselves, because silence is a mirror, a brutally honest one. It doesn't offer comfort. It doesn't protect their image. It shows them everything they refused to look at while you were still trying to keep the peace. They will feel rejected. But you're not rejecting them. You're reclaiming you. You're reclaiming the time you spent explaining your heart to ears that only listened to respond. You're reclaiming the peace that was interrupted by constant conflict. You're reclaiming the version of yourself that existed before you tried to be enough for everyone else. This is what growth looks like. Not louder, just clearer. You're not less emotional. You're more emotionally aware. You're not colder. You're calmer. You're not distant. You're discerning. You've realized that the loudest person isn't the strongest, and the quietest person isn't the weakest. You've realized that healing doesn't require a performance, that sometimes the most powerful move is simply walking away with no announcement, no closure, no drama, just a silent goodbye that echoes longer than any final word ever could. What if your silence isn't just a pause, but a reset? A complete system reboot that forces everyone around you to reassess how they treat you. Not because you yelled, not because you broke down, but because you stopped showing up in the way they expected. And in that quiet disappearance, something powerful happens. The roles reverse. You become the question they can't answer, the absence they can't ignore, the presence they now crave, not because you begged for it, but because they lost the version of you they thought would always be there. You've redefined the terms of engagement, not through force, not through conflict, but through calm boundaries and intentional silence. And now, they're not sure what to do. Because silence doesn't just remove noise, it demands reflection. It forces people to sit with the discomfort they usually avoid. And when they're forced to listen to their own thoughts without your energy buffering them, that's when reality hits hardest. You see, the ego hates silence because it feeds on attention. But your stillness, it starves it. And what's left when the ego starves? Just truth. Raw, exposed, undeniable truth. That maybe they weren't as right as they thought. That maybe you weren't the problem. That maybe they pushed too far, and now they can't reach you anymore. So here's the question I leave you with. If silence can expose someone's true colors, what did yours just reveal? If this echoed anything inside you, subscribe, because the next one might hit even deeper. And if you've ever used silence as your shield, I want to hear your story below.